Welcome back to This Week in Film. It's the weekly podcast where we get together and talk about the movies we've seen over the past 7 days. I'm Nick Panunto, joined as always by Midwest Matt Lauer. Matt, how is it going?
Going all right, Nick. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I have seen 3 movies this week. It is lunchtime upstairs, and they are letting us know.
Oh, I saw 1 movie this week, and nobody's eating lunch here, so we'll just starve.
Oh, what movie did you see?
I saw The Inventor, Out for Blood in Silicon Valley.
Oh, never even heard of that.
It's an HBO movie.
Okay.
What did you see?
I saw The Lost City of Z, or Zed, depending on what country you live in. Because it's a British character, I assume it's supposed to be Zed. And I watched a movie called Hesher from 2010 and Upgrade from 2018.
Hey, all right.
See? Eventually I'll get to these movies you recommend.
Finally. I was just bracing myself for another crappy DC animated movie.
I guess I'll start,
Yeah,
since I've seen so many.
I can throw in a preview corner somewhere in here, but yeah, you should definitely go first.
Okay, so I guess I'll begin with Hesher, because I don't really have a whole lot to say about this movie. It's from 2010. It's directed by Spencer Susser. It stars Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Natalie Portman, and the main character is this young person named Devin Brochu. I don't know if I'm saying that right. But basically the plot of this movie is this kid who's either 9 or 15. It's very unclear. He's supposed to be in high school, but he's so small. He has recently come back to school following the death of his mother. His mom died in a bad car accident. He broke his arm, and his dad is in like a horrible down spiral of crippling depression, and they're living with his mother now. And the kid is dealing with this horrible bully at school, and just overall just terrible. His life is just this downward spiral of horribleness. He, for whatever reason, comes in contact with Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, whose name is Hesher. And he's this real dirtbag kind of a guy. What isn't really clear is the time period that this takes place in. I believe it's supposed to be the mid to late 80s. It's difficult to say, but the entire soundtrack is old Metallica and Motorhead. And this Hesher character, his whole life is he's like a headbanger guy who's just a dirtbag, and he's crude and gruff. And he's got this beautiful long hair that if it's a wig, it's the best wig I've ever seen. But I don't know when Joseph Gordon-Levitt had a chance to grow his hair out. But he's covered in these terrible tattoos that just scream, "Look how much I don't care." You know, like, I don't even care what my tattoos look like. And for whatever reason, he's in this high school with this kid. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt's like pushing 40. As far as like how old he actually is, but it's not clear if he's just hanging out in this high school or if he's actually in high school. The kid somehow gets him thrown out of the house that he's, what's it called when homeless people are staying somewhere they're not supposed to? Squatting, yeah. He's squatting in some house, and the kid gets him thrown out. So Joseph Gordon-Levitt moves into his house because he says he is. It's very confusing. It's very convoluted.
What made you want to watch this movie, if you don't mind me asking?
It was there. we were like scrolling through the list, and we were like, "You want to watch this? No. What about this? No. Well, what about this? Whoa, look at this poster. Joseph Gordon-Levitt has such gigantic pecs. What? Is that Natalie Portman? It is. All right, let's check this out." And that was basically the conversation. And so Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character moves into this kid TJ's house against the kid's will. Like, he just forces himself in there and like threatens the kid constantly. I mean, like, to sexually assault him, to murder him. And there is a good while you're watching this movie where you're not sure if the Hesher character is a figment of this kid's imagination. And it's not.
Are their parents responding to the fact that this guy's showing up in their house?
Not really. The dad, who's played by Rainn Wilson, is taken aback to this guy, but he's heavily medicated, and I don't think he's really all there. He's really dealing with a lot. And the grandmother is kind of senile, but she's very nice. And for whatever reason, Hesher and the grandmother really bond. They develop this like strange bond where they just really enjoy each other's company. This is such a bizarre movie. I don't know if it's good, but it is phenomenally well acted. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is terrific in this movie. Natalie Portman is in it. For some reason, I mean, they could have eliminated her character completely and the movie really wouldn't have changed too much, but she's quite good in the movie, even though she's supposed to be playing, it's difficult to say if she's supposed to be playing like a 20-year-old or like a 35-year-old person, and it really gets messed up because the main character, this younger guy, the TJ character, really looks like he's under 10 years old, but he's in high school. So your concept of how old people are is all over the place. But the acting is terrific. The main character, the TJ character, played by Devin Brochu, he is just terrific. There are a couple moments where you're like, oh yeah, he's still a kid actor. But for the most part, you are totally on board with this kid. And like I said, Joseph Gordon-Levitt is fantastic. Rainn Wilson's very good in this very subdued role. The grandmother is really good. You really believe everything that's happening. While we were watching it, it's kind of long. Like, it really feels its length. It's only an hour 45, I think. But it feels long. Like, while you're watching it, you're like, boy, I don't really want to watch this anymore. You get the feeling of when you're watching that movie Gummo, where everything is gross and all the people are disgusting, and you're just kind of like, it's a movie that just makes you feel uncomfortable. Yeah. And that's kind of the point of it. And when we first started talking, I was putting these movies on my list, and I really couldn't decide where to put this movie and whether or not I would recommend it. And I would say that I recommend checking this out just because of the acting is so very well done. It's shot pretty well. I think the movie thinks it's more important than it is, which I don't know if that makes sense. Like, it feels a little pretentious, but it's done really well. And it's kind of a shame that I had never heard of this before last night, because it's quite well done. And the guy who directed it apparently was one of the writers for the first Saw movie. He and James Wan have worked together for years. This is just like one of this guy's projects. And it's really worth checking out, I think. It's very odd. You're going to feel gross the whole time. And I think at the end you may feel like me, where you're like, I don't know how to feel about that.
Yeah, I think I might pass on that, but I can appreciate that it can be good and disturbing, but I don't think I'll be in the mood for in that mood to feel that gross feeling for a while.
Yeah, I don't ever want to see it again, but I'm glad I did. So yeah, Hesher. Yeah, Hesher. It's from 2010, which is crazy. It's like 10 years old.
Yeah, that totally doesn't ring a bell at all.
Yeah, I'd never heard of it. If you come across it, check it out if you've got some time to kill.
All right.
Everyone in the world.
Especially our friends in Brazil.
Yes, where we're number 4 for film reviews. And I guess that's all I have to say about it. I don't think I really have too much more to add.
Okay.
Do you want to do your preview corner?
Yeah, sure, why not? This is a special preview corner because I wasn't actually in the theater. So I saw in this list of previews, it was all action previews. First, there was a movie that I pretty quickly decided was not Jumanji. But like for the first 2 seconds, I was like, is this a third Jumanji? Are they coming out with a third Jumanji before the second one's out? But no, The Rock is in another jungle movie called Jungle Cruise.
Oh, yeah. It's like the remake of The African Queen.
Or it's a movie based on the Jungle Cruise ride at Disney.
Which is based on The African Queen.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, Are you serious?
I am.
Oh, I thought you were completely kidding there.
I've never told a joke.
Okay. All right. Well, in this movie, it looks like they're poking fun at the ride in a way. Like there are things that are like popping up out of the water that are mechanical. There's this kind of the segment before The Rock shows up. There's a lot of showing who I thought was Kate Winslet doing kind of Indiana Jones stuff, and I'm like, wow, Kate Winslet's really attractive. I've never really looked at her and seen her quite as attractive as she looks right now. She's aging brilliantly. And then towards the end, I was like, oh wait, this is Emily Moss. No shade on Kate Winslet. I'm sure she's beautiful too. But I was sitting there going, she seems like she's getting younger. And she is a different person. But anyway, The Rock and Kate Winslet are in this movie. Or not Kate Winslet. Emily Blunt are in this movie. It does kind of look this way. Like Emily Blunt's an adventurer. And The Rock must be kind of doing this fake cruise thing. Just as a way to make money off of stupid tourists or something. But then he ends up needing to kind of chauffeur her down this river to get to some sort of Indiana Jones style MacGuffin. So anyway, I don't know if it looks good or not because I spent the whole time trying to figure out who the woman was. Then I saw a preview for
before you move on, I guess I should say that the Jungle Cruise is inspired by the African Queen.
Look that up while we were talking, did you?
I didn't. I just didn't want to interrupt you.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's good to know. I feel like I saw the African Queen once, and I just don't remember it.
I watched it like a couple years ago for this show, and it's pretty good.
Was there a hippo and a giant snake?
I don't think so.
Okay. So it's based on it in that there was a boat on a river.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then I saw a preview for Bad Boys for Life, which is Bad Boys 3.
Yeah.
And it looks every bit as uninteresting as the first two, which I have seen and did not enjoy.
I've never seen the Bad Boys movies.
They are darker than you expect and less fun than you expect. And and this one just looks like everything they could pack into the preview is just not even really jokes. And it's all half jokes about them being old. And that's it. It's just them saying they're old a lot. And then young cops singing the Bad Boys song. And then Will Smith and who's the other guy?
Martin Lawrence.
Yeah, Will Smith and Martin Lawrence being like, no, you can't sing that. And that's it. It looks super uninspired. Speaking of super uninspired, the next preview was for Top Gun 2.
I disagree.
No.
I can't wait to see this.
I could totally wait forever.
Oh, God. I mean, it looks terrible, but I was like, I am on board.
Why? Like, what? Because it doesn't... why don't you just watch Top Gun again? Because it looks like they're saying, hey, we're going to have each scene from Top Gun, but older.
Uh-huh. Exactly.
What, you want to see that?
Yeah, and he flies like an F-18 or an F-22 or something in this movie. In addition to the F-14.
If anybody's wondering the plot, here's what I've got. Maverick hasn't gotten promoted much, but he rides a motorcycle and sings, I hope this movie bombs. And that was it. Then I saw a preview for The King's Band, which I've seen different previews for a couple times. This must be like the third one. Still have no idea what the plot is. It seems to be a prequel, and they completely rip off the Wonder Woman shot of the guy being kicked through the wall. It just, man, none of these movies looked good. And then there was a movie called Underwater, which I had called Sub-Movie until it actually told me what the preview title was. And it's got Kristen Stewart in it, and there's something coming from the bottom of the ocean.
Oh, no.
Monsters of some sort. And by the end of the preview, I was kind of intrigued. I was like, all right, I don't know if this is going to be like The Abyss or Deep Star 6 or what, but...
What is Deep Star 6?
Deep Star 6 movie about a crab monster.
Oh.
You don't really know that till the end, but yeah, it's a monster movie. Deep Star 6, if I remember right, was actually pretty decent. I know I saw it once, maybe within the last 15 years, after seeing it when I was a kid. And I wouldn't say it held up perfectly, but it was like, okay, yeah, no, this is still decent. This isn't a batteries not included situation. So this one, I don't know. I don't even know what I think of Kristen Stewart at this point, because she's been in a lot of different stuff, and I'm sure she's more talented than the Twilight movies would have you believe, of which I think I saw one. But yeah, that I might find out about Underwater. And that's it. That's all the preview corner.
Oh, okay.
So shout out to Big Ticket in Florida and all the people in Brazil who like preview corner.
All right, so then I guess I'll talk about The Lost City of Z, or The Lost City of Z, because that's how they say it in the movie. But we're America. So this movie's directed by James Gray. It stars Charlie Hunnam, Robert Pattinson, Sienna Miller, and Tom Holland is also in this movie. This movie, when I started watching it, I did not realize was based on a true story, and I just thought it was going to be a movie about adventures in South America, like an Indiana Jones-ish style adventure movie. And the first 45 minutes or so are basically the plot of that movie I watched a couple months back called Agira, The Wrath of God, that Werner Herzog movie.
Okay, yeah.
It's much the same as that, except that they condensed that whole movie into 25, 30 minutes. Unlike the Klaus Kinski's crew, Charlie Hunnam's group makes their goal, and then they return to England as heroes. These famous explorers. And basically the story continues from there, where Charlie Hunnam becomes obsessed. He plays this character named Major Percival Fawcett, or Percy Fawcett, and he becomes obsessed with discovering this lost civilization in Bolivia/Brazil. On their first expedition, he finds signs of civilization like broken pottery and things of that nature. And his second in command is played by Robert Pattinson, who is fantastic. He's really good in this movie. And I really haven't seen Robert Pattinson in much. And like you, I think I saw half of a Twilight movie and I was like, oh, this is the Twilight guy. And like, I know he's the new Batman and stuff. And after watching him in this movie, I was like, I'm kind of excited for this dude's Batman.
Yeah.
He doesn't play a Batman-ish character at all, but he's really good. And also, isn't he American?
No,
he's not
British. Yeah.
Oh, he is? Okay. All right. Well, then he does a great British accent. He's
a real natural.
Yeah. But he's terrific in this movie. The main guy, Charlie Hunnam, is pretty bland. But his character doesn't really have a whole lot to do. He just does like a lot of looking off in the distance and exploring stuff. So, like I said, he becomes obsessed with finding this city, but then he gets drafted back into World War I. So there's this World War I sequence, and that's when I found out that this was based on a biography, because I'm like, what does this have to do with the story? And I'm like, oh, it's because that's what happened to this guy. I'm just like, I guess we're just going to take a 30-minute detour into World War I. It's interesting. And the movie takes place over a period of, I want to say 30 years. And it starts with his son, Jack, is a young boy. And it ends with Jack as a young man going on an expedition to find this city with his dad, and Tom Holland plays his grown son. This movie is okay. I was pretty disappointed in it. It seems like it wants to be better than it is, and it just never quite makes it. It looks fantastic. It's shot very well, but the story itself is just kind of bland.
Okay.
And like a lot of the stuff that happens feels a little cliched, even though they do try some new things. And like I said, it's based on stuff that actually happened. So that's why it's in it. After watching the movie and then finding out it was based on somebody, I read into this guy a little bit more. Apparently, they really Hollywood up the story, where while you're watching the movie, you're like, wow, this is like a great guy. He believes in equality for everyone, and what he's really into, like the reason he's so interested in finding this lost city is because it proves that there are advanced civilizations in the world outside of Europe, and the Royal Geographic Society that he belongs to, which finances many of his journeys, they have that early 20th century mindset of if they're not white, they're not right. You know, and so like everyone who isn't white is a savage, and everyone who
2019 red hat.
Yeah, exactly.
Mentality.
Yeah. He kind of rails against that idea throughout much of the movie, and you're like, oh, this guy seems like kind of a good guy. And then I read his Wikipedia, and apparently he was kind of a bigot in real life. So like after reading that, after watching the movie, you're like, oh, well, now I don't know how to feel about this guy. So I like the movie version of him better because he seems more of a good person.
Good person, yeah.
Yeah, like, you know, take Wikipedia for what it is, you know. I didn't really do a whole lot of research, but the story itself, as far as a film, it's pretty well told. It's just not very interesting. It's long. It's really slow. At the end, I'm trying not to spoil anything, but like at the end, you don't really know what happens.
Okay.
You spend like so much time at the end with these guys, and you're like, well, what's about to happen? And then they don't actually show you because no one knows what happened. And
that's kind of interesting for a biography story.
Yeah. Now, so that's basically what happens. And then I was like reading into it, and someone made a comment on IMDb. Like I was reading some of the IMDb reviews, and one person said, I think a more interesting story would have been the search for this guy, because so many people went searching for this guy and his expeditions to come back with different stories. And so like what could have been a more interesting story is different interpretations of what happened on the journey. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh yeah, that does sound like a much more interesting story where you could really explore different aspects of this guy's personality based on who we're telling the story from. So you could play up that he wasn't such a great guy in one story, and then in another story he's an angel. I thought that was interesting and a missed opportunity. But overall, this movie was pretty okay. I'm not sure if I can recommend it or not, so we'll find out at the end of the episode because I'm still trying to decide, but I definitely watched it.
Well, let me ask you this. In terms of the Robert Pattinson Batman thing, what's got you thinking that it'd be good? Is it just that he does a good job, or is there something in the character that's like, I don't know, would be a Batman quality that you'd want to see on screen?
There's just something about him as an actor where when he was on screen, he's very captivating.
Okay.
I was more interested in him than I was in the main character. He's just a good guy in the movie. Like, he's not like a conniving guy or anything like that, nor is he very interesting. He and the Charlie Hunnam character, they're just on the same page the whole time. Uh-huh. And like that was cool. Like there's this one part where they get into this argument and you're on Robert Pattinson's side. You're like, he's absolutely right. You have to turn back. You cannot, this expedition is over. And Charlie Hunnam is like, I can't, this can't be. And Robert Pattinson's like, it's over. Deal with it. And you're like, that's right, Robert Pattinson. It is over. Let's go home before we're all dead. And you're just like, I enjoy this guy. And he has like this screen presence where you're like, I could see him as a Batman. He seems a little short to be Batman. He doesn't seem like a tall person, which is, my Batman is like probably 6'2", and he looks like he's 5'5" or 5'6", especially next to Charlie.
They've been making Tom Cruise look like a normal sized person for decades. Yeah,
but like maybe Charlie Hunnam is just crazy tall, and it throws everything off.
It's possible too.
Yeah. That's really all I got to say about that. It was long. I watched it with my son, who was like paying attention half of the time and then playing with his toys the rest of the time. And my wife came home from where she was and she goes, "How was your movie?" And my son goes, "It was boring, Mommy." I was like, yeah, he's not wrong. He's not wrong. It is kind of boring, but kind of interesting. So I'm torn.
Well, is that it for The Lost City of Z then?
That is The Lost City of Zed.
All right. Well, I guess I should go next then, and we'll end it out on Upgrade and find out what Nick thinks of this movie.
Uh-huh.
Drum roll with the... Oh, I can hear the tone. The Inventor. The full title of this is The Inventor, Out for Blood in Silicon Valley. And it's a documentary about a woman named Elizabeth Holmes who said that she had invented and got money to create something that they were calling the Edison. She started a company called Theranos, which... is a combination of therapy and diagnosis. And these sorts of like combine two names to come up with a name thing happens a lot. Like there are things called nanotainers, which are small containers for blood. I emphasize that they're not that creative because this woman's so goddamn proud of herself. Like it's so this is another Fyre Fest type movie where you're watching a con job happen and then kind of seeing how it eventually folds, which I think these movies are really popular right now because there's so much of that happening with the Trump
mindset.
Well, the people, like it's not coalition, but anyway, his people and him. Anyway, you get to watch this happen with another company. It's similar to the Fyre Fest stuff because you get to see a lot of buy-in on the front end and people just wanting things to be, believing what they want to believe.
Yeah.
And kind of like there are a lot of places where they're like, she didn't actually explain much. She didn't actually answer questions. And there are recordings of her and quotes and stuff. And she's actually interviewed straight up in the movie, or at least it's edited in a way that it seems like she was interviewing for the movie. Could be cuts from something else. But she doesn't, there are a lot of moments where she doesn't say anything really, but people are like, wow. And I guess she was following Thomas Edison's pattern. This was something that he did, which was to say he had already invented something and to get other people bought into it, like literally to like have them like buy stocks and things like that so that they're invested in pushing it along until with it in mind that he was going to be able to create the thing. And so it's, I guess it's not a con job where they never plan on actually making the product, but they're making all sorts of promises. She's making all sorts of promises that aren't going to happen, but she hopes they will. I mean, it does seem like throughout the movie they are trying to create this Edison box thing that was supposed to show up at Walgreens and test your blood for hundreds of different diseases in like a matter of minutes for, next to nothing in terms of cost. Maybe some of this is that I had heard about her before I watched the movie, but as I'm watching, I'm like, man, I do not see what people find so charismatic about her. Other than she's proud of herself, there's not the charm that other people would have. Sometimes you see people get conned and you're like, well, it's that smile. They just, here's what they fell for. With this woman, I'm not sure. I guess they just fell for greed. She sounded confident that they were going to be able to do this. Maybe it's the idea itself, because it does sound like it's something good. This is going to be the best way to do this. It's going to be technology that makes this stuff so much cheaper and more accessible to everybody. So maybe it's a bit of that too. They do kind of make it implied in a way that she has charm over like older men. I don't think anyone in the movie said anything about her using any sort of sex appeal or being seen in a sexualized way by anybody, but it seems kind of implied at times when they're talking about her appealing to like older men, or maybe it's more of like a granddaughter appeal thing, but like these guys are trusting her and putting tons of money into her. They also show people there's like a montage of like people who had her on their shows or endorsed her, and like in that is like Joe Biden at some point being like, wow, this is the best thing ever, and not only is she creating such a wonderful product, but it's going to be so much less expensive and so much better than everything else. There is a lot of cheating going on to make it kind of do the things that the machine is supposed to do, but it gets ridiculous. Okay, so this movie starts out pretty slow and not very engaging and gets gradually, very, very gradually, more interesting as you go. There's a point maybe about halfway through where they start talking about the machine itself, and they're like, man, there's blood all over the place. This thing's like getting dirty and breaking, and things are spinning out of control. And so there's like, it's just a total mess. But then there were people who would come in to do like a demonstration. And so like, Nick, if you had to do this, if you were trying to sell something that tested blood, and then some of your investors were like, we want a demonstration, how would you try pulling it off?
Oh, well, do I actually have a product, or am I still trying to scam people?
You're still scamming people.
Okay. Well, I guess I'd ask for a blood sample. And then, because that's easy to do. And then we take their blood, and then somehow, sleight of hand style, switch it out for a fake vial of blood or something that contains a blood-looking substance, so that when it's in this fake machine, it looks like it's doing something.
Okay. So you kind of kept in mind like they would want to see the machine work.
Right.
They went about this the other way. They were like, what we're going to do is we're going to take their actual blood, slide it into the machine, take them out to lunch, have the people who already do blood tests do the blood test with normal procedures in like fast forward, and then bring them back from lunch and be like, oh, look, here are your results coming out of the machine. It's so ridiculous. They did do some things to try to make it more convincing, but there are a lot of places like throughout the movie where they're like, we got special permission from like Walgreens to postpone something, or to be allowed to do something ahead of schedule that nobody else would be allowed to do, or without proving something. Different states that they get to allow them to present or make claims without proof, while they like kept biding time to try to get their shit together. And they would continue to use like other pieces of equipment to try to seem legit. Like they would do some blood tests, but they kept making it sound to people like they were doing it with this machine that they invented. What they'd basically be doing is using normal state of like standard equipment. It's interesting to see those things, but I gotta say, like, most of the stuff that feels worth remembering is from the second half of the movie. So if you feel like you want to check this out, I'd say be prepared to like kind of be distracted a bit through the beginning, but also do wait it out for the second half, because that's where you're going to see more of the stuff that's pretty interesting, where any of the like drama happens, or the funny stuff that you like, they start getting paranoid and getting all these like bodyguards and stuff, and then people start trying to like do whistleblowing things or share in a way that's along the lines of whistleblowing. Like if they get fired, they might make a complaint or share some sort of secret. There's one guy who's like, you know, I work with this stuff every day. Like knowing 100% how bogus it is. And he's like, but when she would talk to me, I would still get kind of convinced that it works. So there must be something about her. I couldn't see it on the film. Everyone agreed that she doesn't blink. And it seems very true. I mean, they could edit that, but there's definitely no moment in the movie where you see her blink. And she's always putting on this fake deep voice. And if you want to understand what I mean, just think back to Kevin McAllister in Home Alone calling the police and being like,
card?
No, not the slowed down thing. Not the slowed down thing. In the first movie where he's like, my name's Murphy, my house is being robbed. You know, like, send the police now. You know, like whatever he says, like it sounds like that.
Oh.
And I had heard this beforehand, and I thought they were going to say something about it in the movie, and they never actually address it in the movie. So I'm just watching going, when are they going to say something about this stupid voice she's putting on? And so once the movie was over, I just looked it up on YouTube, you know, to see if I could get a clip of her speaking with her regular voice. Now, she's been putting on, one thing this woman does seem to have is like, whatever delusion she's trying to buy into, she's pretty dedicated to it. And the voice thing is a big part of it. So there were some reports from other people who were like, yeah, towards the end of a meeting, you know, it was the end of the day and she ended up dropping the voice for a moment. But there's a recording like she's doing an interview or something, and for like half a second she says 3 words in a normal voice that sounds like comfortable and the right pitch, and then like drops right back down into this fake voice, and it's pretty interesting and convincing in terms of like, yep, okay, that's definitely not her voice. I'm trying to think if there's anything else really stood out about this. I don't think there was anything in terms of how this documentary set up. The overall building interest in it is good. I mean, it's going in the right direction, that it gets more interesting and not less interesting. But I think it could be edited down. It's 2 hours long, or just about that, and doesn't really need to be. I don't know that all of the stuff that's included needs to be there, because it feels a bit repetitive. And I know along the way there are a couple questions where I'm like, well, I would want to know more about that. I wish they would say more about, one specific kind of dropped line that's still something intriguing. So I don't give it a lot of, I wouldn't give it a lot of praise as a documentary. But if you do like watching these sort of con job disaster stories, I think you'd be pretty satisfied. Okay. It is an interesting story overall. It just could have been done better, I think. So that's that.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard of that woman, and from what I understand about her, because I didn't really follow it that much, it's just that basically it was like this product that was, of course, too good to be true. And all these billionaires bought into it. And the reason she got busted is because they never actually released a product. So all those billionaires lost their money.
Yeah, like they never actually finished the Edison thing. And there were a lot of people who, once they would hear about it, would go like, how can this work with physics? Like, you need more space to be able to do the testing than would fit in this box. And that it ends up being exactly the case. It's not something they can actually make happen.
She would have gotten away with it if it didn't get so big.
If it weren't for those pesky millionaires.
If it weren't for all those billionaires, she'd have gotten away with it. But like, she walks away with like a ton of money, doesn't she? Well, like, isn't she a billionaire because of it?
I'm sure she's rich. There wasn't the end of the movie too, like when it's time for something to go written on the screen, does not say much. It's just like she and the second guy who she like had a relationship with at some point. The two of them are being charged with fraud and some other thing, and they both pled innocent.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, I guess that was in 2017. I guess it must still be going on. I don't know, because this is a 2019 movie, and I did not look that up, actually, which it might be a sign as to how the movie's not super interesting. But yeah. I know when the scroll came up, I'm like, do we have any more information on this? So if you're wondering about that sort of stuff, I'd say you're not really going to get the answer here.
I like watched the whole collapse of it, but I never really understood like what they were doing, other than like, I thought it was for the longest time, I thought it was like another LabCorp or like a place you go to get drug tested. And this was just like a different way of doing it. And I didn't know it had anything to do with diseases and stuff. But
you aren't wrong on the LabCorp thing. Like, that's who they refer to as basically the bad guy. They're like, oh, we want to offer options that are more accessible and less expensive and don't involve needles going in your arm. They make it seem like getting pricked on the finger is just the best thing in the world. So, which I guess, some people really do hate getting shots or getting blood taken. So that's true for some people. But they're hyping it up, so they make a huge deal out of it. But yeah, they do refer to like, LabCorp sucks, so we're going to kick their asses. Right. And when it comes to things falling apart, it sounds like throughout the entire process, it was running like a house of cards. It's not substantive. It's not actually functioning well. But in terms of it coming out and becoming public, like they had kept things close to the chest long enough that it wasn't really known until two people in the movie that they highlight in particular kind of brought things to the attention of a journalist. I don't remember what paper the journalist worked for, but there was some struggling there, and lawyers trying to stop it from happening, but then it did all come out. So if you heard like a few grumblings, that might have been because a few bits of information were coming out, but then it was like, oh, boom, we can finally say all that stuff.
Yeah. For a while, it just felt like billionaires fighting over money with each other. Like, money fight. where Smithers and Mr. Burns are throwing $100 bills at each other.
You do get to see some of those people talk too, where it's like, oh yeah, I was happy to give her my money. A lot of politicians and big names that are like, oh yeah, this person.
Well, it's because everyone thought they were going to get rich off of it.
Richer,
like you were saying, like greed. Greed was everything with this thing. Like no one bothered to do the due diligence because this lady was able to convince them with buzzwords.
Yeah,
it's too good to be true. It probably is. Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds interesting. I might check that out.
Yeah, if you have the patience to go through the first hour of it, then it's worth it.
All right. Well, then that brings me to the final movie I saw this week, which was Upgrade from 2018, directed by Lee Whannell, something, and it stars Logan Marshall Green and some other people. And Logan Marshall Green is your he's your low rent Tom Hardy.
Yep.
And I love this movie. I tried to throw you off earlier with a little tone, but this movie was great. It's good.
Spoiler alert on this movie because we've both seen it, so we might.
Yeah. So going forward, all spoilers, I guess.
Sounds like recommend from both of us, though.
Yeah, I totally recommend it. Like 30 minutes into this movie, I was texting my dad and my brothers, and I'm like, "You guys gotta watch this immediately." And then they're like, and my brother wrote back. He's like, "Oh, I've seen it. It's fantastic." The only thing I didn't like was like the last 15 minutes.
Yeah,
the end of the movie, it really falls apart. But I don't care.
Yeah, you're
I
like,
don't care
whatever.
at all.
This movie knows what it is. It's very self-aware. It's tongue in cheek.
Yeah,
and it's just kind of meant to be hokey and fun.
Yeah.
So when at the end it gets kind of like cartoony master villain kind of thing, it's like, oh, all right, fine. I guess we had to go somewhere.
Yeah, this movie's got to end, so whatever. What I really liked is that the movie took its time to get established. Like they do a lot of world building real quick and subtly. Like it starts with Logan Marshall Green working on a car, and it feels like it's the middle of the night because it's indoors and it's lit by like these neon lights, and he gets this car working and he's like, "Oh, I love you," because it's, like a muscle car or whatever. And he like cracks a beer and then he opens the garage door and it's this bright light comes out, and I was like, "Oh man, is it like 9 o'clock in the morning now?" And he's just cracking the beer and he just finished working all night. And then his wife comes home, and in this future car that looks just like, did you see the Tesla?
Oh, the Tesla truck?
The truck from the other day?
Yeah.
It looks just like the Tesla truck. I was like, oh, man.
Listeners,
this movie was ahead of its time.
By the time this episode's out on the air, this will probably be old news. But if you haven't seen the Tesla truck demonstration, just look up Tesla truck window, and you'll be able to bring it up on YouTube.
Yeah.
And you can see God, this is the weirdest looking thing. And as Elon Musk is like, this car is indestructible, they basically just throw a ball at the window and it smashes. It's great.
It's great. I like his response where he's like, oh, that didn't work out. But so like they live in this future where he's a very analog guy in a digital time, and his wife works for some robotics company and whatever. And he's like, he loves his wife, and they go and deliver this car that he's been working on. Oh, because it's the future. I was reading the internet trivia for it. The movie takes place in like 2050.
Oh, I didn't realize it was supposed to be that far ahead.
Well, because somebody pointed out that when he's looking at his wife's records, it shows her date of birth is 2008.
Oh.
And then I guess at some point she mentions her age, and so they did the math.
Okay.
So it's supposed to be like 2050 or something like that. Anyway, so like everyone, like most of the cars on the road are these Tesla auto drive cars where the car just drives itself. It's a future car that drives itself.
Like Logan with the self-driving trains.
Yeah. And I mean, that's like been a thing in movies for forever, but this is done so casually and so well. Yeah. I really appreciated it, but I also appreciated that in addition to the robotic cars on the road, there are just other cars too.
You can sort of feel the timing of it instead of having to worry about details or figure it out.
Yeah.
Or have them say like, it is 2050.
Yeah, exactly. And so like, like there are gas-powered cars still on the road, in addition to these supercars that are primarily driven by the wealthy. And they establish that there's this class divide without having to talk about it. And it just does this really good job of world building. And then the tone of the movie totally changes when, again, we're in spoilers, when they murder his wife.
Right.
Like they take over his car and they cause the car accident, and then they murder his wife. And you're like, wow, this is... I feel for this guy. He really loves his wife. And then, like, he wakes up in the hospital as a quadriplegic, and you're like, oh, this sucks. And then, like, we spend 20 minutes with him trying to, like, manage his life as a quadriplegic.
He does a pretty good job with the frustration and stuff.
He does a fantastic job. He's a terrific actor.
Well, okay, let's not go too far here.
No, I mean,
this is a great movie for him.
Yes. No, that's what I mean. In this movie, he's a terrific actor.
I've seen him in other things. And that's
I've seen
always the case.
He's terrific in this movie. There's that sequence where his mom is like cutting his beard, and he just starts crying. And I was like, oh man, I really feel for this guy. He's in a really bad place. And it doesn't feel hokey or forced or any of that stuff. It's just like a very real kind of a moment, and they don't drag it out, they don't play it up. It's just this thing that happens, and then the story continues. And basically the supercomputer guy comes up to him and he says, remember that microchip I showed you? I can put it in your spine and fix you. And he's like, he basically just goes, all right, let's do it.
Yeah.
This was great. Like when the chip takes over and he tries to solve his wife's murder, and he goes to that first house, and the robot in his brain starts talking to him. I got a lot of heavy Venom vibes.
Yeah.
Which doesn't help the Tom Hardy comparison.
No. No.
I don't know. I think I like this more than Venom.
I mean, like, when I do want to give this actor credit. I mean, he has been crappy in other things, but in this movie, he does a great job. And it's not like when... And I swear I'm not bashing on Keanu Reeves. I love Keanu Reeves. But when you see Keanu Reeves in something and he's doing a good job, you're like, oh, this movie was built for Keanu Reeves.
Uh-huh. No,
this movie doesn't feel that way. It doesn't feel like, oh, they took his strengths and weaknesses and just catered to them. Here it's like, no, this is a pretty challenging role. And he just does a great job with it. And it hits its high notes when the machine or robot, whatever, like takes control physically. And he looks surprised while he's kicking ass. I don't know who else could pull that off, but it looks great and it makes it really fun.
Yeah, there's that sequence where he's fighting that first guy.
Yeah.
And again, I was reading the internet trivia for it, and there's like that one part where he's fighting the guy, and the camera work is outstanding.
Oh yeah, it's very kinetic.
It's like the center of the frame, or the focus of the frame, is his head. Mm-hmm. And we're like moving with his head, and it's supposed to like give you that sense of we're out of control with him, but his body is in control. And there's one part where the guy he's fighting is going to punch him in the head, and he does this thing where he grabs his chin and slides his head to the side. And the trivia explains that as STEM, who is the computer in his spine, STEM sees the punch coming towards his head, and he can't control anything above his neck. The robot can't control anything above its neck. And so he moves his head out of the way. And I was like, oh man, that is like such a nice little detail. And the fact that when it happened in the movie, I was like, oh, that was kind of cool. And then when I read what happened later, I went, oh man, how well executed is that? That not only did it look cool later, but when I received more information later, it fully explains what's happening, and
it really makes it make sense.
Yeah. Like, it wasn't just done for the sake of looking cool. It was done for a reason.
It's sort of functional.
And the other thing that I really liked is before he knows that STEM is there, before STEM's in his head, it's like his first night in his house. And he's going to get, like, he stands up to walk around, and he goes to get a drink. And the way that he walks is so digital. It's so unnatural looking, and it's just so perfect. Like, it looks like a computer is controlling his movements. Like, he's taking these very specific steps, and he goes to pour himself a drink, and his arm, like his arm moves up 10 degrees, slide hand over 15 degrees, grab the knob of the bottle, pick up bottle, tilt, pour. He just moves very digital, where like you can see his arms are responding to these commands that he's got. But meanwhile, his face is very human, where he's just kind of like, yeah, I'm just pouring myself a drink here. But the way that his limbs and hands are moving is just so digital. It's outstanding. Like the level of details in this movie. I loved it. It was so well done.
I agree. and I think when I saw this, we followed it up with Hardcore Henry, like a few days later, or maybe a week or two later. And Hardcore Henry's got more action going on in it, but it doesn't have like the factor of the stuff that's like as exciting. It's not. No, it doesn't have quite the fun and creativity to it.
No, absolutely not. I mean, Hardcore Henry was entertaining because it was like a nonstop first person kind of experience. Like, he kind of had never seen anything like that. But when he's fighting that first guy in this movie, and he's telling him to please stay down, please stay down, please stay down. And then the bad guy gets up and he's got a knife, and he goes, he has a knife. And Stem's like, I can see that. Now we have a knife too. And just starts stabbing him. And he's like, why are we stabbing him? And it's,
yeah, he's just looking at himself like, what are my hands doing?
Yeah. I also like that, like, Stem needs his permission to do stuff. And the movie really starts falling apart when he has to go visit the computer hacker. Like, everything after that point, it's like the downward slope, but I don't care. Like that first...
Pretend the last 15 minutes kind of didn't happen.
Yeah, like the fight with the main guy or whatever. I was like, this is dumb. Why didn't he just sneeze more robots into his face? But I really enjoyed this movie. This was a lot of fun. This was a fun-ass movie. And I really appreciated watching it. I enjoyed it. I wish it had done better, because I kind of want a sequel, because like it wraps up real tidy, and I like that it ends on a dark note. But at the same time, I'm like, I kind of want this story to continue. But that's just me being greedy.
I want the second act to be longer. Like, I don't want to. Yes. I don't want a sequel, because he already would understand what's going on. Yeah, I want him to look confused. I want more interaction with him and Stem. Yeah. And if it were possible to have like not a prequel and not a sequel, but like a inquel, where it's like, here's a chapter you didn't see, and we've turned that into a whole movie. I'm like, all right, I'm there.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. You've said it outstanding. I want that whole movie to be the second act of this movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I'd love to be able to go see that in the theater.
Yeah. I mean, just the way he reacts and talks to that thing is just so great. Like, I love when he's like, just shut up, leave me alone. And then Stem goes away, and he's like, hello? And then he can't move his arms, and he's like, you told me to go away. And I'm like, well, all right, fine, you can be here. Some of the problems that I have with it are like when the cop comes over and puts that tracker in his pocket or whatever. I don't know, the whole cop subplot could have been removed easily.
I don't even remember it. It was removed from my brain.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. It's just like for filler. And I kind of hate that this was Stem's long-term plan, was to get put into this guy. I was like, that's kind of stupid. Yeah. But again, I don't care.
I don't even remember. And I think that says something to what the highlights really are of this movie. Because the stuff that's not great really isn't great. But the stuff that's great is so great. But I don't even remember. Does Stem win at the end?
He does.
Okay.
Yeah. The Logan Marshall Green guy is fighting Stem, and Stem says, if you keep doing this, you'll break your mind. Something like that, for whatever. They introduce that. And so basically he breaks his mind, and so then he wakes up, and his wife is still alive, and he's in a hospital recovering from the car accident, but she's alive, and he's there. And then we cut back to the real world, and Stem has taken full control of his body, and the cop's like, what's going on? And he goes, I gave him what he wanted, and now I get what I want. and then he just shoots the cop and walks away. I was like, oh man, that's so dark and terrific.
Yeah, okay, that sounds right. Because I thought it had sort of a tongue-in-cheek ending too, kind of like it's got that dark humor.
I did notice when the computer guy visits him in the hospital to offer him the computer chip, I did notice that he had the earpiece in his ear, and I was like, ooh, I wonder what's going on with that earpiece. That seems important. But then I noticed everyone in the movie just has everyone has an earphone, and I was like, oh, maybe it was nothing. And then at the end, it turns out that STEM was just controlling the computer guy, and you're like, oh, that's disappointing, but I don't care. Like you said, that second act is so good that everything else is
forgiven
completely. And the first act is quite good too. Like you really get establish the world so well that it's fine.
With you highlighting that, like I appreciate even more how true that is. Like in terms of world building, but also just in terms of like, oh yeah, I was he was engaging as a character because even though it's a bit of a damper, he does a good job of being kind of torn. And kind of broken down. The whole he loves his wife thing, I was like, well, I think basically they had sex or something. Like there was this sort of like, here's how they love each other. And I'm like, all right, fine, they love each other.
They get along. They seem to have fun with each other. What I really liked is in the car sequence when the car accident is coming and they're trying to stop the car, but the computer won't let them. There's like this real quick sequence where he sees what's going to happen and he throws her into the seat and puts on her seatbelt. And then the car accident happens, and we see the car accident from inside the car, and you see him bouncing around the interior. And I was like, wow, that's really well done. Not only is the guy, like, they established, like, that he's a hero, like, that's his save the cat kind of a moment, because he saves his wife, but they also established that this world has real consequences for stuff. Just him banging around inside that car, which is the opposite of last week when I saw that Godzilla movie where Godzilla's kicking this helicopter plane and the people inside are like, oh, that's slightly inconvenient. But this guy's inside the car smashing against the windshield, like cracking the screen and stuff. It's just that the weight of the world makes a difference.
Well, and you seem to be hitting again that they do a lot with a little bit of stuff. Like it's very tightly put together, and it's like an hour and a half, right?
Something like that. Yeah, it's real quick.
Yeah. Well, and I think that all kind of comes together where it's like oh man, what's the word I'm looking for here? In any case, it's very efficient where it's like we can kill like 3 birds with one stone by having a bunch of different things established in this one scene. How he is as a character, how the world is, and the relationship between the two of them in an exciting car accident.
Yeah. So Upgrade. Definitely check it out if you haven't seen it. It was really entertaining. I wouldn't say it's a good movie, but it's really entertaining. And like Matt said, that second act is out of this world as far as fun. Yeah. All right. So then that brings us to this week's update of our movie ranking lists. I'll go first because my list is open. I'll start from the top. It's going to be Upgrade. So Upgrade is going to go into my number 27 spot underneath The Red Turtle, but above Descent. I'm going to give it 3.5 stars, and that's a total recommend. Then the next movie I talked about that goes on the list.
Did you just say underneath The Red Turtle?
Yes.
Wow.
Red Turtle was quite good. Okay. That's solid. That's a solid story right there with 4 lines of dialogue. So the next movie is The Lost City of Z, which is going to go into my number 48 spot underneath Brotherhood of the Wolf, but above Hellboy 2019. I'm going to give this 2.5 stars. And I am going to say I recommend it, but it's a light. I can't say I don't recommend it. But I don't ever want to see it again. I don't know. I guess it's a no. I'm going to change it to no. It's a no. Yeah, I guess I don't recommend it, but it's not a bad movie. It's just... And then the next movie I discussed was Hesher, which I'm going to put in the number 54 slot in between Batman and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but underneath that Batman movie and above the Lego Movie 2. I'm going to give this 2.5 stars, and I would recommend seeing it just for some of those acting performances alone. They're quite well done. And those are the movies I saw this week.
All right.
Now, Matt, you also have a list.
I do, and I am placing, you're probably just going to want to call this the Inventor, but the Inventor, Out for Blood in Silicon Valley. And I'm going to place it between The Autopsy of Jane Doe and Crawl.
Oh, that's up there, isn't it?
It's not really. I'm looking at the stuff underneath it. And
it's going in your number 50 spot.
Yeah, and that might seem, 50 might be high in your list, but like 50's kind of like we're getting low. we're getting into the dividing line between things I enjoyed and things I didn't really enjoy. So, but it is in the things I enjoy side of that line. And as far as stars go, I'm gonna give it 2 stars.
2 stars, okay.
Kind of like you, it's like it's not strong one way or another. In fact, I think I'm going to go ahead and say, for you, Nick, specifically, go ahead and watch it. For the rest of the world, I'm going to give it a very weak not recommend.
I guess I'll go with N then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well then, Matt, have you anything for this week's Midwest Matt Recommends?
You know, it's, I think I might have mentioned it before, so you know, take it with a grain of salt. There's a podcast called Can He Do That talks about, kind of clarifies the limitations and the abilities of president. It's from the Washington Post, and they do some pretty good, you know, with Trump being the way he is, there's so many different things you can talk about. They do a pretty good job of taking things, kind of like the podcast Through Line, or Embedded rather. They take a specific story and kind of go like, okay, we're going to explain this today. So if you're into the politics stuff, I'd say check that one out. Can He Do That by the Washington Post.
Okay. Hey, I'm going to start a third time.
And if you have a singing telegram for us,
if you want to get in touch with us, you can send us an email at thisweekinfilmpodcast.com. Tell us what you saw this week.
Or you can message us on Instagram.
Or Facebook or Twitter. We're on all of those things. If you want to get in touch with us, that's how you can do it. But I guess if that is the end of the reel, we'll see you next week in film.
Judge people? No, that's not right. Judge whatever you want. We'll see you next week.